Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome. I'm Joe Stars, Director of U.S. Programs and the Institute on Political Journalism. On behalf of our Chairman, Randy T., and our President, Roger Green, welcome to the closing ceremony of the Fund for American Studies Summer Class of 2018. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to our students, internship supervisors, mentors, members of the TFAS Board of Regents and Trustees, and a special thank you to our donors for providing such generous scholarships for so many of our students. Look at a big hand of applause for our donors, folks. To our partners from George Mason University, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mark Funstein, for being such a positive and supporting partner in our academic programs. I would also like to offer a special thank you to our outstanding faculty. We are so grateful to all of you. There are a number of you here today, so if you're a TFAS faculty member, I know it's dark out there, but please stand and let's give a round of applause to our faculty. And finally, I'd like to offer a special thank you to the family members of our students who are here today. Thank you for sending us your son or daughter to our program. We know the sacrifices that so many of you made in order for them to come to DC to live, learn, and intern. It's been a joy to get to know them and to know that they will soon be part of the TFAS family. Additionally, I'd like to thank our partners at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Through this partnership, we are able to offer the Leadership in the American Presidency Program, or LTAP for short. And LTAP. And then finally, to my colleagues in the U.S. Summer Program. Thank you guys for being such a great team. Thank you for working so hard and for so long to make this summer happen. And a special thank you to our program advisors. You guys were a joy to work with and a joy to be around, so thank you. So it's our tradition for these closing ceremonies to begin the way we should always begin, by gratitude to God and to recognition for living in a great country. So we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation. Leading us in the pledge is Antonius Brown. He was a student in the IBGA program, our Institute in Business and Government Affairs. He's a student at Prairie View and A&M University. He's a marketing major, and his hometown is Houston, Texas. And this summer, he interned at the Associated General Contractors of America. Antonius is a combat engineer in the Army National Guard who served in Afghanistan and in Houston after Hurricane Harvey. Leading us in the invocation is Emily Autry. She was a part of our IPVS program. There you go. She's a student at the University of Ozarks and is a religion major. Her hometown is Hot Springs, Arkansas, and her internship this summer was Jubilee Housing. Antonius.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we come to you today in praise and thanksgiving for this amazing summer. We thank you to all our family and friends and mentors that gather with us today to celebrate. Thank you for all our internship sites and supervisors. Thank you for the Fund of the American Studies, for their mission to bring students to DC to live, learn, and intern. We are humbled by your love and blessings that have been shown to us as we reflect on these last 8 weeks spent in our nation's capital. The blessings of opportunity to grow and learn from professionals, politicians, and professors. The love that has grown in each of us to go out into the world to serve others, to create change, and to be leaders in our communities. We ask as we leave this place today that you guide us and be with us. Fill us with your wisdom to continue to chase our dreams and reach our goals. We pray for safe travels, and we pray that you continue to grow the flame that was sparked here this summer. Amen.
Please be seated. I have no idea what that was. So I mentioned earlier how grateful we are for our faculty who make our program what it is. And so we'd like to welcome Professor Michael Collins from Georgetown University to say a few words. Professor Collins has been part of the TFAS family for over 2 decades. He teaches our ethics and leadership course for our summer programs. He's taught for our programs in Prague and in Greece. He's a great friend of TFAS, so let's welcome Professor Michael Collins.
Thank you. Since in another life that doesn't much involve the fund, I'm a teacher of English literature, I would like to begin today by reading a poem. Don't worry, it's a short poem. The poem celebrates the builders of the great medieval cathedrals like Notre Dame in Paris or St. Vitus in Prague, and the work those builders did to make clear to their neighbors the presence of God in the world. The poem is called Cathedral Builders, and the poet is John Ormond. They climbed on sketchy ladders towards God, with winch and pulley, hoisted hewn rock into heaven, inhabited sky with hammers, defied gravity, deified stone, took up God's house to meet him, and came down to their suppers and small beer. Every night slept, lay in their smelly beds, quarreled and cuffed the children, lied, spat, sang, were happy or unhappy, and every day took to the ladders again, impeded the rights of way when other summer swallows, grew grayer, shakier, became less inclined to fix a neighbor's roof of a fine evening, saw naves sprout arches clerestory sore, cursed the loud fancy glaziers for their luck, somehow escaped the plague, got rheumatism, decided it was time to give it up, to leave the spire to others, stood in the crowd well back from the vestments of the consecration, envied the fat bishop his warm boots, cocked up a squint eye and said, I bloody did that. The cathedral builder's last words here, I bloody did that, which are also the poet's as he looks up at the poem he has just completed, catch up a great sense of pride, the builder's sense of accomplishment, the satisfaction he feels at the beautiful object he has made. He expresses feelings we have all had when we look at a job we have done well and say with pride, I bloody did that. I hope you feel that sense of satisfaction, that sense of accomplishment, as you come to the end of the 8 challenging weeks you have spent with the Fund for American Studies in Washington. But the cathedral builder's sense of accomplishment derives not just from his craft, his skills, or from even the magnificent cathedral he has helped to create. It derives also from his sense that the work was worth doing, that in building the cathedral, he showed forth God's love for a bent and bruised world. The philosopher William Barrett once wrote that technique has no meaning without some informing vision. You have no doubt gained some knowledge, at least I hope you have since I'm speaking on behalf of the faculty, learned some techniques, acquired some skills over the last 8 weeks. Now I hope you will ask yourself how you might use that knowledge, employ those techniques, together with the gifts and talents you have been given, to make better the fallen world in which we live, to bring peace and justice to a world riven by violence and bigotry. The Fund for American Studies says, we teach freedom. Freedom means that you must choose how you will live your life, what you will make of it. My wish for you today, as you return to the people and places you left 8 weeks ago, is that you choose well the life you want to live, so that when your time comes, many, 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 many years from now, to leave the spire to others, to give it up, to step back, you too can look back in your life like that cathedral builder and say that you made this world a better place through the life you lived in it. Good luck. Thank you.
Next in our program, we'd like to hear from a few students about their live, learn, intern, and serve experience. So here to talk about living in DC and the program is Trenton Morgan, or TJ. Yeah, no one got to know TJ very well this summer. I don't know what happened. TJ was part of IPGA, the Institute on Business and Government, Institute on Political Journalism. He's a student at Northwestern State University. He's a media major. His hometown is Choctaw, Oklahoma, and his internship this summer was with Social Media Monthly magazine. Here to talk about our classes is Anthony Adkins. Anthony was part of ICPES, our Angelichev Institute on Comparative and Political Economic Systems. He's an econ major at the Arkansas State University. His hometown is Jonesboro, Arkansas, and he interned this summer at the Institute for Humane Studies. Also to talk about the Learn component of our program is Anna Liu, and she's a student. She's a student at St. Louis University. She's a theater major. Her hometown is Tomball, Texas, and this summer she interned with the U.S.-China Education Trust. TJ.
Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to dive right on in. You can't spell sausage without USA. That is what my floor mates and I learned in our Affinity Commons by watching the 2018 Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest on the 4th of July. That memory is only one of many others that day in the Capitol, and as well as only one in the span of this unforgettable summer with TFAS. I was prompted to speak about the live component in the tagline Live, Learn, Intern. So like you can't spell sausage without USA, you can't spell live without I, V, and E. And so here's how I've lived this summer. I've made the most out of my classes, lectures, events that TFAS has provided us with. Each week, I attended every extra event that I could, like the Capitol Hill Lecture Series, free speech discussions, and floor mixers. Thank you, John. And I still put my all into my internship in my classes. I've returned from classes at 8:30 p.m. to change clothes and take dance classes until 11 p.m. I've sleepily stumbled up the steps of the Jefferson Memorial with friends at 3 a.m. I've dressed business casual on the most humid day to take whimsical photos at the Renwick Gallery. At times, it was all exhausting, but the experiences here are well worth a little exhaustion. I told myself that I would rather give up sleep than to think about the opportunities I missed by not immersing myself for these 2 months. The saying, you get out what you put in, has never been so true to me. Before coming to DC, I had a lot of qualms about my abilities and my expectations. However, living here has connected me with some of the most accomplished and talented people who have inspired me to live relentlessly as my own brand. Caroline McKee from Fox, Brittany Hackett from the Society of Neuroscience, Elliot Cotter from K Global are just a few influential people that TFAS has connected me with. Just by being around GW campus, I connected with Capital Funk, a hip-hop dance team, and Hiri, a Bhangra dance team, that have integrated me with people all over the DMV area. My Nebraska girl Faith and my Jersey sis Kristen picked me up whenever I felt down and alone. Between my floor, my classes, my internship, I've made friends in every sitting that I've occupied. These people who are sad to see me leave, but excited to see where I go, are testaments to genuine relationships I've built since coming here. So while here, I started to notice how many opportunities I'm deprived of in Oklahoma, and it's heart-wrenching to know that I'm going to go back and leave that here. But It is inspiring to know what possibilities lay outside of our current situations. My favorite line of advice is this: you can make success where you are. So wherever you live, make the best of it, give it everything, and give it time. Just like how we all had to do for these past 2 months. Overall, I can say that I lived here in DC for the summer, but I now look forward to a summer when these connections and these opportunities can be called my home. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And as mentioned, my name is Anthony Adkins, and I'm here to speak to you about the second pillar of our program this summer, which is learning. And so this is a personal reflection on how my experience has been. And so this summer I've taken 2 classes. I've taken Economic Problems and Public Policies by Dr. Chris Coyle and American Political Thought by Dr. Richard Boyd. And each of these classes has been among the most exciting, challenging, and engaging courses I've taken in my academic career. My favorite part of Professor Coyne's class would have to be his utilization of economic analysis to subjects that one would assume would fall outside the scope of economics itself. He truly takes the economic way of thinking to heart, and it's exemplified in his work. His exposition on development economics was profound and perfectly explained the hardships associated with foreign aid and nation building. For Professor Boyd, my favorite part was his lectures on the Federalist Papers and the Declaration of Independence. Dr. Boyd's American Political Thought course was instrumental in making me appreciate the complementarity that political theory provides to a student who studies economics. Political theory, it provides one with a normative approach to social problems that gives way to a positive economic methodology. Overall, I'm incredibly blessed to have been able to participate in this program. The course's internship and special events provided exemplify what it means to continually learn and grow professionally and intellectually. I would like to give a special thanks to Laura Cusack, Abby Nugent, and all the TFAS staff for their hard work and dedication. Thank you.
This summer, TFAS has given me many opportunities to learn. The learning opportunities outside of the classroom have been one of the most invaluable parts of my summer. From site briefings and small groups to the alumni roundtable, there was never a dull moment and never a lack of opportunity to learn. Through the Institute of Economics and International Affairs programs and events, I learned a lot in 2 ways, personally and professionally. Personally, in ways that helped me learn about myself and what I wanted to do in the future. And professionally in ways that helped me network and learn about careers and professions that I didn't even know were possible. In site briefings, we had the opportunity to visit the State Department, where we learned about their work at home and abroad. One of my favorite site visits was to the National Defense University, where we toured Fort McNair and visited the place where the 1865 military tribunal of the Lincoln assassination conspirators took place. That was really cool. Small groups, however, was one of the most impacting of experiences for me personally and professionally. I was able to meet other interesting people, like a Foreign Service officer who told me about his career as a diplomat and answered my personal questions about the Foreign Service. I was also able to hear from the Department of Homeland Security employees who secured our borders and enforced immigration. TFAS alumnus Cole Bockenfield was also another one of our small groups. He spoke on humanitarian aid, and we also got to visit the Asian Development Bank and hear about their work helping developing countries. The most personally interesting small group I attended was with Joel Simadeka from ODNI on intelligence careers, and hearing about her experiences really piqued my interest in the work of the intelligence community. Also listening to guest speaker Grace Jo, a North Korean defector who told us about her journey out of North Korea, was both sobering and inspiring. It's people like Grace Jo, Cole Bockenfeld, Jill Simadeka, and many others we met this summer who have encouraged me the most. The people I met from these TFAS events were real people we were able to shake hands with, connect with, and thank for speaking about their experiences and giving us the opportunity to learn from them. Overall, we attended many amazing events and briefings and were able to network and meet with so many incredible people who make real differences every day for our country and for the world. Next month, I start grad school at Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. The people I've met and the things I've learned through TFAS events, small groups, site briefings, and speakers, that's what I will take with me to grad school and beyond as I pursue my interests in international politics. This summer with TFAS has been impactful and has certainly inspired me both personally and professionally to dream bigger, work harder, and continue learning all that I can. Thank you.
Next up, we'll hear from 3 students. The first 2 students are going to be talking about their internship experience, and our last student speaker will be talking about service and how integral it is to IPVS and to the Fund for American Studies. Our first student is Melissa Coyle. Melissa is a student from Chapman University. She's a biological sciences major. Her hometown is Huntington Beach, California, and this summer she interned with the Healthcare Leadership Council. Following Melissa will be Danny O'Neill. Danny is a student in our IBGA program. He's a student at DeSales University, and he was part of the Institute on Business and Government Affairs. He's an international business major, and his hometown is West Islip, New York, and this summer he interned with Caterpillar, Inc. Talking about service is Madison Moore. And Madison was part of IPVS, and she is a business administration and management major. Her hometown is Westerville, Ohio, and this summer she interned at the American Heart Association.
Hi, everyone. I am speaking on the topic of intern. As a biology major, I wanted to discover the spectrum of careers that lie between research and medical school. My limited hospital technology exposure and 2 years of biomedical cancer research have left me desiring new experiences. I wanted to discover what lies within that spectrum. I came into the leadership in the American Presidency program without expectations, and perhaps that's the reason everything exceeded. I was placed in a fantastic internship at the Healthcare Leadership Council, a coalition of chief healthcare executives who lobby Congress. As an intern, I was sent to healthcare briefings both off and on Capitol Hill, attended meetings with top CEOs of pharmaceutical, hospital, biotechnological, and insurance companies, and worked on a project creating congressional candidate profiles for every person running in either an open seat or a closely contested seat in Congress. Through the Healthcare Leadership Council, I was able to meet the CEOs of Memorial Care, Pfizer, Vizient, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem, and many, many more. I became aware of crippling issues affecting millions in our society. For example, one of the hearings I attended in the Rayburn House office building was on the chronic disease community and Medicare. Our healthcare system needs serious reform, and unknowingly, I found myself becoming deeply passionate about the issue. I was also sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings in Dirksen to see healthcare bills such as the opioid bill and the CREATES Act being decided less than 5 feet in front of me. With my own eyes, I was able to see the cost of prescription drug prices lower for Americans at the drop of Senator Grassley's gavel. This profound summer has definitely helped me understand where my passions lie. Going home to Orange County, California, I will have a clearer state of mind. Being able to have a taste of hospital technology, research, and healthcare policy exposure as an undergrad has really prepared me to evaluate where I go after graduation. The internship experience, class, speakers, field events, and general DC life has made me a more developed professional, eager to go off on my own and see what kind of difference I can make in this country. All thanks to the Fund for American Studies, leadership in the American Presidency Program, and the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, I am incredibly grateful. I want to thank Colin Miller and Chase Forrester for all their efforts as LTAP leaders. especially in the internship placement. I also want to thank Kimberly Flickinger, Meredith Stasa, and Janet Tran from the Reagan Institute for organizing class events on and off campus, as well as fantastic speakers. Thank you, Dr. Walker, for inspiring us to reflect on past presidential leadership, to learn from them in our own paths. And thank you to everyone else involved in the Fund for American Studies for allowing us to experience an unforgettable summer.
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, distinguished students and guests of the Fund for American Studies. My name is Daniel O'Neill, and I am now a 2-time alum of TFAS's summer programs. Obviously, they didn't get enough of me the first time. I had to come back for more. I'm here to represent the Institute of Business and Government Affairs and talk about my time as a Government Affairs intern at Caterpillar, Inc. Internships, especially in Washington, are so important because they give you the opportunity to meet someone who could change your life forever. Every day of work, every day on the Hill, every special event is a chance to make a first impression on someone who's willing to advocate for your best interests moving forward. Government affairs representatives are, in a sense, advocates as well. They advocate for the best interests of their public or private entities. The government affairs team at Caterpillar gave me the opportunity to challenge myself intellectually, immerse myself in its advocacy areas, and participate in events that allowed me to build a comprehensive network that will advocate for me throughout my career. For those of you unfamiliar, Caterpillar is the world's largest construction equipment manufacturer and employs over 98,000 people worldwide. My internship challenged me to become an expert in a variety of issues important to CAT and help diversify my knowledge base. I can happily say that I never had the same day of work 2 days in a row. One day I could be in the office writing a report on the Kenyan railroad system or developing e-commerce legislation, and the next day I could be at a meeting, hearing, or briefing on China's unfair trade practices. I was able to communicate directly with members of Congress on some of the most hot-button issues of the summer, most notably on international trade and tax reform. I was also encouraged to attend special events hosted by the International Trade Building, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and the National Association of Manufacturers. This gave me a chance to interact with policymakers outside of work and establish lasting relationships for the future. Throughout the summer, Caterpillar gave me a comprehensive internship experience that cemented my interest in government affairs and made me feel like I was making a tangible impact on our mission each and every day. I want to take the time to thank Roger Ream, Joe Stars, Laura Cusack, Darian Cantu, John Folks, and my boss, Kai Hirabayashi, for giving me an opportunity to change my life in Washington, D.C. I originally went to college with no idea where my future was headed. Over the last 2 years, TFAS has helped me build a career that I never thought was possible and helped me develop the skills to pursue my passions with unmatched conviction. My message today is to find your advocates. Find those people in life that will fight for you no matter what the situation may be. I can happily say I found my advocates, both at Caterpillar and with my family here at TFAS. Now's the time to go out and find your own advocates, because something even as small as one great conversation can change your life forever. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the warm welcome. My name is Madison Moore, and I'm honored to speak on behalf of my peers with the Institute of Philanthropy and Voluntary Service. The person standing in front of you today is not the same person who was sitting with you 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks ago, I was a young woman from the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, excited for a big move I only imagined attainable in my dreams. My golden ticket came as an invitation to join as a Leadership Scholars Fellow and a member of IPVS. Though I was nervous, I found my home in service. Winston Churchill once said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." This summer, we created a life in DC. During the weekday, we invested our time at our respective internships. Some of us gave the gift of summer camp to inner city kids, while others worked to call home the homeless. For me, I found myself behind the scenes at the American Heart Association. As a special events intern, I collected donation items that would generate funds to build healthier lives free of cardiovascular disease through research and education. Even when the clock struck 5 p.m., our giving didn't end. Our weekends were spent filling the empty with a symphony. Through sweat and tears, we cleaned up local parks, repainted the National Mall, and worked to put food on our neighbors' tables. With our heads held high, we wore our sunburns and poison ivy rashes as Olympic golden medals. I will never forget the day I left my mark on DC. It was Service Saturday, and I found myself in a bright yellow safety jacket on the campus of American University. I was told I would take a tree my height and plant it into the ground. I thought to myself, my goodness, how can I plant this tree when at times I struggle to keep myself grounded? By hour 2 of digging and sweating, my team had welcomed our dogwood to its new home. To celebrate, we named it after each of us. Laila, after Kayla, Maddie, and Darla. I've never felt more rooted in a community than that moment. This summer, we gave back to our communities. In our first month, IPVS transformed pennies into Franklins to form a $2,000 grant. Our grant would go on to create a new life for the children of the Spanish Education Development Center. Now, because of you and I, underserved preschool children will get to experience the power of music and drama. Even with this win, we kept on giving our time, our friendships, our stories. My time spent with IPVS has taught me many lessons, so I will leave you with this. Service is the seed of change. It may take a village to grow the garden, but it takes one individual to plant the seed. And from the seed will grow the most fruitful garden, the fruit of possibility, truth, and equity. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, everybody. So next we're going to show a little video of some of our summer highlights.
What a summer! Congratulations to every single one of you in the TFAS class of 2018. We actually trademarked live, learn, and intern. We have it protected intellectual property. And you guys have lived, you've learned, and you've interned. So congratulations. What an accomplishment. TFAS was founded more than 50 years ago. I wonder if the founders of TFAS ever imagined that 50 years later, more than 350 students would be sitting in a room in the heart of the nation's capital, sending Instagram photos and Snapchats to their friends throughout the world. I doubt it, but I know one thing our founders would have imagined. They did imagine that we would have students complete a summer program who were intellectually curious, civic-minded, and committed to making the world a better place. As you may have discovered this summer at TFAS, we're somewhat partial to the idea of freedom. We are partial to that idea because we think it is the way you recognize a person's God-given rights and their human dignity. Freedom to pursue and develop your own skills and talents, freedom to serve others, freedom to express your ideas and your opinions, to worship in whatever way you may choose or not to worship. That's an important ingredient of how you achieve human flourishing in this world. Our Constitution, very importantly, begins with, in order to form a more perfect union. And I was thinking about that as I walked up here, that is an indication that perfection hadn't been achieved at the nation's founding. Every generation must continue the American experiment in liberty. That's why we do these programs. It took many years after the founding for us to eliminate human slavery. Many years before we extended the franchise at the federal level to women. Many years more until we eliminated Jim Crow laws, till other groups in our society, marginalized groups, became to have human dignity. So it is an ongoing experiment. And that's why I send you out today from here with the challenge to commit yourself to being lifelong learners, to apply your reason and your sense of compassion to finding solutions that extend human flourishing throughout the world. Whether we continue the global trend that is leading to the eradication of poverty and famine is now up to each of you. Whether the world will continue to see the spread of equality is up to you. The decades-long movement that is leading us to societies where people are healthier, richer, safer, freer, happier, more literate and smarter, in the words of Steven Pinker, is in your hands. Dream big, work hard, and punch holes in the darkness. Remember always that freedom is a moral achievement and is a blessing. Being able to live your life as you see fit is not what most people in the history of this globe have enjoyed. So keep that achievement alive. You will now be joining the TFAS Alumni Network. Keep in touch with us. Attend our alumni events. Share your news with us as you go through your education and your careers, and make us proud. It's now my pleasure to introduce John Stossel, who will be delivering our annual Neal B. Freeman Lecture. Let me tell you something about Neal Freeman. Neal served on our Board of Trustees and is now a trustee emeritus, living in Florida. He graduated from Yale University and immediately began a career in journalism of all kinds. He was a Washington editor for National Review, producer of the highly acclaimed PBS television series Firing Line, and chairman of Blackwell Corporation, where he served as executive producer of American Interests and Technopolitics. He served on the board of the Communications Satellite Corporation, ComSat, and was director of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Most recently, he is the author of the book Skirmishes. It's fitting that John Stossel will be delivering the Neal B. Freeman Lecture this morning. John is a journalist who immediately began pursuing his career coming out of Princeton University. He began as a consumer reporter and has a distinguished career that included being the recipient of 19 Emmys. 19 Emmys. He was co-host of ABC's 2020. More recently, the host of Fox Business's Stossel. He's the author of a number of books. My favorite, the book Give Me a Break, which I highly recommend to all of you. In 2017, John Stossel joined Reason as the host and creator of Stossel on Reason. His work there includes weekly videos that range in topics from local government corruption and steel tariffs to reforming education and the war on plastic straws. He writes a weekly syndicated column. He's active on Twitter. Follow him. You'll get great information coming your way. It's appropriate that John Stossel will be speaking today because he has always, throughout his career, had a commitment to getting the truth and uncovering the facts. That's been front and center in his journalism career. He goes where the evidence leads. Something every good journalist should do and every person should do in their life. Please join me this morning in giving a warm TFAS welcome to John Stossel.
Now you can reasonably say, what can this old guy teach me? But I want to reassure you, I was once young like you. Hairstyles were different then. As Roger said, I was a consumer reporter, my first job, and I was, like most people who graduate from Princeton, on the left. I'd been taught by my professors that capitalism is okay, brings us some stuff, but it's by and large cruel and unfair, and that's why we need government to intervene. We need experts. And I totally believed and reported with that attitude, criticizing business, and my peers loved that. As Roger said, I won lots of Emmy Awards doing that kind of reporting. And the solution to fraud was always regulation. It's just intuitive. You see a problem, you want the government to step in and fix it. Command and control. And you could say the last administration was a big believer in that. You can't just trust people to change the light bulb. They needed direction. Ideally from someone who went to Harvard, even better. And that's a joke, but certainly I can't get my brain around how you design a sewage treatment plant or an automobile. Instinctively, we want to turn to experts. And evolution programs us this way. We come from people who grew up in tribes of 100, maybe 200 people, and if you didn't listen to the tribal elders and harvest the fruit at the right time, you died and didn't give birth to the people who gave birth to you. And we grow up in families where if you don't listen to mom and dad, you may die. You certainly won't thrive. So the idea that there should be something called the free market is foreign to our brains. And I certainly believed in this command and control model. You maybe have learned in the past 8 weeks things that have brought your brains to a new place. I wasn't as smart as you. It took me 15 years before I started to see this doesn't work. The solutions that we consumer reporters proposed weren't making things better. They were just making life more complicated. There was more paper to fill out. Taxes were higher. There was vast energy loss just filling out the forms. Lobbying. Some of you worked with lobbyists this summer, just trying to lobby the powerful government so they don't put you out of business. What happens if you try to open a business today? I tried to open a lemonade stand outside Fox when I was working there. And I tried to do it legally, but I couldn't do it legally in the 2 months I had before I finally had to air this story. First, you had to register with the county clerk's office. That must be done in person for some reason. Then you had to get an IRS number. Then you had to take a 15-hour food preparation course. Take an exam that takes an hour. If you pass, you have to wait 5 weeks for your food protection certificate. Then there's a health department inspection. It takes 3 weeks just to get the appointment. And if you pass, you can set up a business once you get the government-approved fire extinguisher. I eventually saw these rules don't make us safer. They didn't even have much effect on the obvious crooks, the people selling the diet pills and penis enlargers and free vacation you've won. What would happen? Maybe 5 years into the scam, the sleepy regulators would come down on them. And then the crook would hire a defense lawyer and use our very slow legal system to hold him off for another few years. And then they would sign a consent order. That's where you say, we don't admit doing anything wrong, but we won't do it anymore. The lawyers then get paid, and the business moves to another state and does the same thing. It didn't make things better for consumers. What did, it turned out, was competition. In a free society, the way to get really rich is to serve your customers well. Took me too long to understand that and see the power of it. I wrote a book about that. You referred to it. This changed my career in the media. Suddenly, I was not winning any Emmy Awards. My colleagues, because I was now covering government's mistakes, were just less impressed with my work. Somebody came up to me on the street in New York and said, "You John Stossel?" "Yes." "I hope you die soon." So I'm trying to understand what the anger, the hatred is about. And at first I thought it's because they now viewed me as a conservative. And where I live in Manhattan, that's like being a child molester. That's the worst thing you can be. But I'm a lousy conservative, and you actual conservatives who might be here have a right to be furious at the networks that I was the closest thing they had to a conservative, because I wasn't a conservative. I think we should spend less on the military. I think drugs should be legal. I think sex work should be legal. I think homosexuality is just fine. I'm a libertarian, and they still hated me in New York. Why? I've come to think it's because I was a consumer reporter, now saying, for the most part, business is okay, and it self-corrects via competition. There's some cheaters, some Enrons, some Bernie Madoffs, but they are a tiny percent, and eventually they get found out. Now I was criticizing government, and reporters hate business and love government. Government is their source. So what's that about? At first I thought maybe it's envy of the wealth, and the wealth disparity is upsetting. And a lot of the people in the media, they went to college, they learned from professors who maybe had slightly stupider roommates who went into business and made much more money than they did, and they're envious of that, and that's taught. But then I thought about the kings and queens of old Europe. They had 1,000,000 times more money than the average person. They weren't hated. They were revered. But people hated the bourgeoisie. They gave them that critical name. They hated the very people who sold them things that they needed to make their lives better. So what's that about? And I've come to think it's because it's intuitive to believe that when someone makes a profit, they make it off you. If the businessman made a bunch of money, then you must have lost money, that it's zero sum. And he thinks that way. That's what the tariffs are about. He says China took $800 billion from America because we have a trade deficit with China. Again, I can see why people think that life is a zero-sum game. In politics, it is. One person wins, somebody else loses. In lawsuits, sports. But business is not zero-sum because it's voluntary. Every transaction happens only because both parties think they win. And you see it in the simplest of transactions. You buy a cup of coffee. You give her the buck, she gives you the coffee. And there's this weird double thank you moment. Thank you, thank you. Why do you both say thank you? Because she wanted the coffee more than she wanted the buck. She wanted the buck more than she wanted the coffee. You wanted the coffee more than you wanted the buck. You both win. When we bought $800 billion worth of stuff from China, that's because we thought it was in our own interest. As individuals, we got a better deal. Everyone wins, as one of the signs said on the slideshow you had, because it's voluntary. Trade makes us all richer. Adam Smith understood this. He wrote about it so many years ago. The invisible hand makes us all better off. When individuals, even greedily, pursue their own self-interest. So now I've had this epiphany that took me 15 years, and now I want to explain this on TV. But I found this much harder to do than talking about bad businesses, cheating people. It was easy to expose one of them. How a giant free market works, all voluntary, it's tough to explain. And Adam Smith looks like a fat cat. He doesn't help make the point. And the invisible hand is invisible. How do you communicate that story? I'm at ABC, I'm at Fox doing it. My son told me in an age of social media, I don't need a network anymore, and nobody will believe what I say in New York if I'm still on Fox, so I should start on my own, and I have now on the internet, making a video a week. But how do we communicate these ideas visually? I came to prefer over Adam Smith Hayek's idea of the spontaneous order. It's a little easier to get your brain around that a school of fish, a flock of birds, nobody's directing them, and yet they work it out spontaneously. Think about an ice skating rink. What if you were the regulators, and I came to you, and you'd never heard of an ice skating rink before, and I said, I have a new business idea. Will you approve this? I want to rent a big arena and flood it, and then freeze the water, and then charge people money, and they'll come in and strap sharp blades to their feet, and they'll zip around on the ice. And my only rule is go counterclockwise. I mean, Hillary Clinton would say, no, you got to have skating stoplights. You got to have regulation to keep it safe. You need a skating director with a megaphone telling people which way to go. We tried that with Brian Boitano, who just won the Olympics, and it made the skating worse. The spontaneous order works. When I say this to people, they often say, all right, well, the free market will work for the skating rink and innocent things, clothing, movies, music, but much of life is just too complex for individuals to make their own decisions. Education, we don't know what the curriculum should be. Cars, we don't know what makes one run better than another. Again, that's intuitive. But let's think about cars for a moment. I'm no automotive engineer. I don't know what makes one good, makes one safer. But compare the worst you can buy here in the United States with the best the planned economies could produce. And that was this car, the Trabant. It was a terrible car. You had to put the oil and gas in separately and shake the car to mix them together. We make jokes about rocket scientists. He's no rocket scientist. But this car was built by East German rocket scientists, the smartest people they had. And there was a 3 to 4 year waiting list to get a Trabant. Yet when the Berlin Wall went down, the Trabant disappeared. It couldn't compete with our mediocre stuff. Same with the Yugo. All the vehicles produced by geniuses at the top of planned economies. Why? Because everybody doesn't have to be an expert for the free market to work its magic. You just need a few people, a few car buffs, or a few people who read the car magazines. And through word of mouth in an open society, the good and bad news spreads. The good companies grow. The bad ones atrophy. Free market will protect us even if we are ignorant. So people say, all right, maybe it'll protect us on products, but what about safety? The greedy factory owner has no interest in protecting the workers. He just wants to make more money. He doesn't care if they're working in unsafe conditions. That's why we need OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And President Clinton was fond of showing this chart, showing how workplace deaths had dropped since OSHA began. And injuries dropped at about the same rate. And you could say this is a good example of why government is so necessary. Except somebody finally researched workplace fatalities from before and after OSHA and found this. OSHA didn't make any difference. Government's like someone who jumps in front of a parade and claims, I led the parade. Now, why were things getting better? Because in a free society, things get better on their own. When there's an accident, we learn from that. We make changes. Unions may demand some changes. As we get richer, we care more about safety. Wealthier is healthier. Also makes us smarter. Even the most evil factory owner starts to care about safety, if only because it costs him money to retrain workers to replace ones he kills. The free market will protect us better. When government protects us, there are always unintended consequences. OSHA is a good example. At first, there were some safety rules, a rule book about this thick. Now, over time, the rule book has grown so it might reach the ceiling, and lawyers spend years arguing about details in that, and huge amounts of energy and money are poured into these legal fights rather than to producing good things. Some of your smartest classmates are going to law school. Many of them won't make America wealthier. They will just fight about the rules. And yet, government keeps growing and trying new things. Another example of the unintended consequences is the war on poverty. When I was your age at Princeton, they taught me, look, we know how to solve poverty, and it's outrageous. We live in this rich country, and some people are so poor. But we got a solution. We have programs. We can teach people how to lift themselves up, how not to be poor, and we created welfare, and I cheered that on. And you can see in the first 7 years, it reduced the poverty rate. But then what happened? The program had unintended consequences. We taught people to be dependent. We said to women, we're not going to pay you if the father of the child is living with you, or we'll pay you less. Some kicked the father out. And then look at the line before the war on poverty began. Americans were already lifting themselves out of poverty on their own. This giant government program, and we have spent trillions of dollars on it, sped progress for 7 years and then stopped it. Government action always has unintended consequences. And yet government grows. This is a graph, size of government since the beginning of the Republic. And we need some government. We need rule of law. We need pollution control rules. The founders didn't think of that. There's a role for government, but how big a part of the economy should it be? Politicians don't ask this question. I wish they would, because people might say 5%, 10%. And if you look at when America grew the most, when we went from a backwards country to the most prosperous country in the world, government was less than 5% of the economy. The first blip jumping there is World War I, the second is World War II. At that time, at least, spending went down after the wars. But then came the Great Society, and since then the spending has only gone up. And you can see it looks like it went down a little bit there at the end of the graph, but that's only because that's the stimulus blowout and it expired and spending dropped a bit with the sequester. But now it's going straight up because of the entitlement spending, because people my age rudely refuse to die. And to pay my Medicare and Social Security, you young people will be taxed to death. In fact, there just isn't enough money to pay to what us baby boomers have been promised. How that will break down, I don't know. I'll be dead. It will be your problem. So you've been educated about some of these things, and yet you see the danger in a government that is too big. And yet, instinctively, you still want more. I'd like to try one thought experiment, maybe it won't work on you, to see how you feel about regulations, say. So let's say you're the regulators, I'm a greedy businessman, and I have a new fuel I want to introduce. It'll be about the same price as oil, but it'll reduce our dependence on OPEC. It's always useful to have more fuels. The only problem with my fuel is that it's invisible, odorless, deadly poisonous, and unlike oil, which is flammable, this is so flammable it's explosive. So invisible, odorless, poisonous, explosive, and I want to pump it into your home. So should this be approved? And let me try is this working? Yeah, an ambush interview here just to see if I can work it on your group. So will anybody here give me like a normal answer to this question? Like, who doesn't want this fuel? Somebody here doesn't want it? You don't?
I do not want the explosive fuel.
So that's a reasonable response that most people have. Though I want to interrupt and say, you work for Social Media Monthly?
Not anymore, technically.
How could it be Social Media Monthly? I thought it's social media every second. Anyway, why don't you want this new fuel?
It's colorless, odorless, and is
just too dangerous, right? So what kind of stove do you have at home?
Soap? Did you say?
Stove.
Electric.
I don't care about your soap. What kind of stove do you have?
The fire one, the conventional one. The gas, think of the gas.
A gas stove. Invisible, odorless, deadly poisonous, highly explosive. It only has an odor because they add mercaptan to it so you can smell it before it blows you up. It kills 200 Americans a year, natural gas. But we accept it because we got this before we got so crazy about regulation. But it would never be approved today. You wouldn't approve it. Cars wouldn't be approved. I have a new form of transportation. It will pollute differently from the old form, less solid waste. The streets won't smell as bad, but there'll be more air pollution. And people will drive it at 50 miles per hour, inches from pedestrians. And we're going to kill 30,000 people. And 16-year-olds would drive them. No way that would be approved. So as a consumer reporter talking about these threats, it's my job to cover the threats. And I would do these scare stories about something every day. But finally, I started to think, this isn't serving the viewer much, because you can't be scared of everything. We should focus on what really is dangerous. And trial lawyers were always bringing us horrible stories. Bic lighters are exploding in people's pockets. They've killed 4 Americans over the past 4 years. I was finally getting sick of these stories, and so I compiled a list of what kills people. And I could say to the producer, all right, I'll do Bic lighters if you do plastic bags first, because they kill not 4, but 40 Americans every 4 years. Or buckets, 5-gallon buckets, kill dozens, mostly little kids who fall into them and drown. It's a big country. A lot of horrible things happening to people. If we scare people about the ants, they can't pay attention when the elephants come. And they called me callous, and they got someone else to do the story. But I eventually did a show that ranked risks and tried to focus on what are the biggest, what should government focus on? What should we worry about? And what are some of them? Well, certainly the media has to cover plane crashes. It's big news if a plane crashes. And at the time, people were covering all sorts of stories about the most dangerous airports. What do you do if your plane is crashing so you might survive? And I refused because I think it's statistical murder. And we finally got the research to back this up, because it turns out the way to compare risks is not by how many people are killed, but by how many days does each risk take off an average life? Because something that kills you is less socially tragic than something that kills older people like Roger and me. So comparing it that way, flying is no threat. It takes less than a day off an average life. There are almost no plane crashes. We worry a lot about terrorism. But even if September 11th happened every 3 years, and it's been 16 now, 2 days off an average life. Compare that to ordinary house fires. We don't worry about that. But 9 days, a much bigger threat. Our brains are skewed about this. A $10 smoke detector is a wonderful thing. Whoops. If you add driving, you start to see how the plane crash coverage is so counterproductive and misleading to people that if more people drive to grandma's house for Thanksgiving instead of flying because they're worried about flying, that's statistical murder, because we scare them about the wrong stuff. And the smoker worrying about getting brain cancer from his cell phone is just crazy. By comparison, all the other bars shrink. To me, the most interesting bar is this last one. It says poverty, probably should say low income. Because if you're in the lowest quintile of income in other countries or below the poverty rate here, your life is 7 to 10 years shorter. Now, some of that's because poor people smoke and drink more and sometimes act more recklessly. But much of it is because poor people can't afford the good stuff that helps keep us alive. In Bangladesh, there are floods that kill 1,000 people. In America, there are floods just as bad, and with the exception of Katrina, nobody dies because we have wealth. We have cars so we can drive away, radios to hear about the flood, dikes to divert the water. Wealthier is healthier. So what this means is when there are crazy regulations that make it harder for the supermarket to open, that kills people too. The headline should be new OSHA rule to save 4, kill 8. We don't see that though because reporters don't think that way. So it brings up the basic question. How do we create prosperity? And why is America prosperous? 7 billion people on Earth. For 1 billion of them, life is awful. They live on $1 or $2 a day, $1 or $2 a week. Fewer than 1 billion have anywhere near our level of wealth and comfort. Why did America become prosperous? So I asked this for one of my shows at an auditorium in New Jersey like this, of high school kids though, and they are silent. And then one kid says, it's because we have natural resources. We were a new country. Another says, we invented democracy. That's why we're doing well. They don't know about the Greeks. And I say, well, actually, India has democracy and natural resources. India's poor. Oh, India's overpopulated, they say. But actually, the population density of New Jersey and India are exactly the same. And what about Hong Kong? Its population is even higher. And they have no natural resources, really. It's just a rock. And yet Hong Kong went from third world to first world in just 50 years. They never had democracy. They had the British rulers and now the Chinese. No natural resources or democracy. What did they have? They had the secret: rule of law and economic freedom. You need government. You need authorities to punish people who steal or kill. And the British rulers did that. But then they did something wonderful. They practiced benign neglect. They sat around and drank tea. And free people, left alone, made Hong Kong wealthy. It now has our level of wealth. And one reason is low taxes, simple rules. It takes now about 3 weeks to legally start a business in America. It took me even longer for the lemonade stand. That was a food business. In Hong Kong, I could start this stupid business selling yo-yos and frisbees from ABC, get permission in 1 day. That made the difference. That created prosperity. And India, which stayed poor, this is what I would have had to do. My idea might have sat on one of these shelves for years. Ideas die on those shelves. So when President Obama ran for office and said, yes, we can, I quarreled with that because we came to mean government. I wrote this book. And the truth is, the subtitle is the meat, that government does fail, but individuals succeed. And that's what's kept America alive as government has grown. If government leaves us alone, we prosper. Economists focus on the economic part of economic freedom, but the freedom part is just as important. I object to big government not just because it makes us poor. It's a moral objection because it reduces our control over our own lives. It makes us less. It makes us smaller. Somehow, in spite of the constantly growing government, we thrive because private groups still manage to achieve new things. Charities like TFAS, Salvation Army, families working toward common goals, greedy profit-seeking businesses. What do they give us? Air conditioning, computers, cars, cell phones, flush toilets. I mean, the kings and queens of Versailles would be envious of the life poor people in America have now. And poor people in America live longer, better lives than they did. We have fresh food, music and theater on demand, pain relief, electric light. We take it for granted. We take it for granted when we go to a supermarket. We shouldn't. We should fall on our knees and thank capitalism. Think about it. It's open 24/7, unlike our public schools, which are not. Private supermarkets open all the time. The aisles are wide. It's brightly lit. They offer on average 30,000 products, unbelievably cheap. They rarely poison us. It's a miracle. Or how about that you can take a piece of plastic and stick it in the wall in a foreign country and cash will come out? Or you can give a total stranger there who doesn't speak your language that piece of plastic, and she'll rent you a car for a week. When you get home, Visa, MasterCard will have the accounting correct to the penny, and you'll scream if they don't. And yet government, by contrast, can't even count the votes accurately. Yet instinctively we turn to government. Despite that, most Americans say, I want government to do more. I hope you have learned here in the 8 weeks that I can't manage slides well, that the free market provides far better than central planning. Hayek and Adam Smith had the right idea. I hope you fight for that liberty that made America possible. Thank you very much.
And now I'd like to introduce the chairman of our Board of Trustees, Randy Teague.
Thank you for those informative observations. I think Neal Freeman would be very proud that they were given in his name. I've had the opportunity over the last 8 weeks to speak on several occasions, luncheons, dinners, other events for your individual institutes. It's been a great pleasure to do that. I've made some observations about how, as you go through life, you should address yourself within the context of that life, career, family, etc. And since most of you here have heard those remarks at those occasions, I will not use this precious time to repeat them. I would like to summarize a few of those observations, though, and then make a few additional ones so that you can leave and go to your certificate ceremonies, and then leave here and return to your communities, hopefully enlightened and excited by the 8 weeks that went so quickly for you here this summer. I make that observation because, as I've indicated at a few of those events, while we say at the beginning, we say at orientation, this will be the fastest 8 weeks of your life, and then here you are today at the end of the fastest 8 weeks in your life, I just want you to recall that every 8 weeks is the same number of weeks, days, hours, seconds, nanoseconds, etc. All of your life, when you go through that door and out on the sidewalk, proceeds at the same pace, and therefore make the very best of your life within that pace that you possibly can. That having been said, that great philosopher Winnie the Pooh reminds us that everyone needs a place out of the wind. And I think that's a critical observation because everything is coming at you today from every direction, constantly, thousands, hundreds of times every hour on your cell phone, whatever the communication mechanism may be. You need some time to be with yourself. You need some time out of the wind to be able, in the silence of life, which you have to work hard to find that silence, to think about whom you are, and where you are going. That leads me to the observation that I have made several times this summer, that it's critically important, especially at this age within your life, to listen to what other people share with you as to their impressions about you, because they may see and often do see things within your personality, things within your interests, things within your experience that show to them strengths that you have that you may not recognize yourself, aspects of your life that may need to be demonstrated in different ways. I think one of the things that's beautiful about the American system of education, unlike aspects, well, let's take Germany, let's take England, where at level 6 or level 8 in your education, we call that 6th grade or 8th grade, your entire life is decided for you by other people. That's how we end up with classes in supposedly classless societies. You're either headed to university or you're headed to apprenticeships or whatever else it might be. In our culture, in our society, within our democracy, we do not approach it that way. But at your age, it is critically important that you be open about where your life might go. I stand here, Roger's tired of hearing this after many years, but when I was in high school, I grew up on the west coast of Florida. It was a great place to grow up if you ignored the old people. That is a joke line. It's a serious observation as well. I grew up in St. Petersburg, a town that's known as the home of the newlyweds and nearly deads. But it was a great place to grow up. There's nothing better for a teenage boy than growing up with the Gulf of Mexico almost right out your door. You had beaching, you had swimming, you had sailing, you had scuba, you had motorboating, you had everything that involved water, salt water. Fishing was part of that, and I became fascinated by marine botany, marine biology, sort of headed in that direction. Everything looked pretty good for me. By the time I finished high school, I'd done work in the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the Western Mediterranean, and was headed to the east coast of Africa for the Western Indian Ocean for various studies in marine biology. But a teacher of mine in high school, because I had become president of student government, said to me, let's really spend some time thinking about this. I shorthand months of conversations with this fellow into the short expression once made by him, 6 months at sea, 6 months in a laboratory smelling of formaldehyde. Is this really the life that you want for yourself? And so I changed my mind. I came to Washington because he came to Washington. He came to Washington and founded the Fund for American Studies in 1967. And so it had a tremendous impact on me in the sense that I gave up a life of marine biology to pursue law and everything that comes to you in Washington in the pursuit of law. But it was because I listened to somebody else making observations about me and what my experiences had shown to him. It's critically important. Probably the most important thing I could say here today is that what you need to do is protect your own individuality. No matter what your philosophical persuasion, your religious persuasion, or lack thereof, no matter what your politics, focus on your individuality. Your mother's DNA and your father's DNA came together in some exciting moment. You were birthed. Here you are. You are the only you. There's never going to be another you. Now, of course, if we go into some Eastern philosophical structures, you might come back. But you are you. And so it's critically important that you do what you want to do. Get inputs from parents, get inputs from your neighbors, get inputs from professors, get inputs from others. But you are you. There will never be another you. When you get to the end of the road, however that is defined theologically or otherwise, you are going to be responsible for yourself in a way that nobody else will ever be responsible for you. Make sure, no matter what mistakes you make along the way, and we all make those mistakes, but we have to learn from those mistakes along the way so that we try to reduce them. Sometimes we repeat them, but we work harder at it. But you get to the end of the road, whenever that might be, and it's going to be a long time from now for all of you. In the law work, sometimes you get exposed to insurance records. That exposes you to actuarial records. The Japanese life insurance companies are now writing policies for women, at least, expecting a life expectancy of 110 or older. And so you're going to have a long life, but at the end of the road, it is your life and no one else's. do everything you possibly can to make it the very best life that you can. Thank you very much.